I think a lot about, I mean, we all have to think a lot about Venezuela these days, but what I'm paying attention to is really how the U.S. has put itself in the middle of Venezuela and China's trade with Venezuela. China was obviously, China, Russia, Iran were the key supporters of Venezuela, and Venezuela was one of the key supporters of Cuba. So, when you look at the relationship between the U.S. and China, it's interesting that China is now feeling the chokehold of its oil deals with Venezuela, because we don't really have a lot of cards to play with China. And so the fact that we're actually restricting their, any access to Venezuelan oil, kind of like a giant anaconda around this economy, and taking over the control of energy assets. It's very interesting to see what China's response is going to be.
I like how you kind of say in your notes here, Heidi, China's real problem isn't oil, it's debt as it relates to Venezuela. What do you mean by that?
So, I mean, Beijing has about a 10 to 20 billion dollar Venezuela debt problem, debt exposure, and most of it's structured as oil for loans. I think in terms of how it's not a major source of China's oil. It's about 4%. So this is painful, but not existential. But the debt, I think, given that they have these long-term contracts, then they do have this debt exposure. They're going to have to figure that out with the Trump administration, because I don't think that the Chinese are really looking to lose 10 to 20 billion in revenues.
And I know when President Trump when initiated the operation to take Mr. Maduro and perhaps put in a more friendly government, it was Mr. Trump and the administration said, U.S. oil companies are going to go in there and invest and really make a lot of money in Venezuela. I'm not sure we heard that type of enthusiasm from the energy CEOs, because they've had some bad history in the past in Venezuela. How do you think U.S. oil companies or Western Europe oil companies are going to deal with Venezuela?
So, I mean, it's one thing to do an oil export quarantine and bring the full bearing of the U.S. military around, that chokehold on exports. But I think, you have governance that's really unresolved. You have Delcy Rodriguez, who's claiming legitimacy, but she's still,
Right.
insisting Maduro is the real president. They don't have, I think for short-term kind of
Right.
wildcatters, it's going to be an opportunity. But I think you need stable rules. You need long-term capital for to repair the infrastructure,
Right.
and you need security. I think it's just
Right.
not a secure place right now.
Heidi, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Let me squeeze this in. Are tariff percentages coming down? The zeitgeist this morning from the FT, from our Jenny Leonard, is metal tariffs are going to come in. Do you just presume that tariffs are going to be lower than we expect?
So, I mean, the tariff question is it's sort of a moving puzzle, because you have these IEPA rulings outstanding. You have, different agreements that are being renegotiated. For example, with India, you have a lot of exemptions that are being given for, things that we actually need in the United States that we don't produce. That could be inflationary if we don't have if you have the tariffs remaining in place. So I think you will see tariffs come down, but I think it's still going to be a very bumpy
Right.
ride to where we get to a landing zone where we have some stability.